Now I'm going to do section B, and I'm going to block this off so I have a little less to look at. I find it helpful to use these little trays. And what I do is I lay out the pattern pieces and keep them organized. These are two that I pre-sewed. When I showed you earlier how you could sew a couple of strips of fabric together and then don't cut these apart, leave them as one piece and then iron them on the seam. That's how I did these here. So in section B, I can sew 1 and 2 together, so those are already sewn. And now I can add 3 because it's the same length as 1 and 2. So here's number 3. And what I'm going to do is put them right sides together, peel back the corner, check the corner. Don't check the whole line, just check the corner. Okay. If you pull back and you look at the whole line, what's going to happen is the freezer paper is going to pop off, and then it's going to be annoying. So what I do is I just check the corners. Okay, I'm going to pinch fold it. Now if you can't see that fold, another thing you can do is you can take a straight pin and you can drag it along the edge as you're sewing. Sometimes that's helpful. What I do is I just sew a skinny 1/4 of an inch, and then if I don't sew closer, I just move it with the iron. That came out pretty good. Okay, if it didn't, I could just remove this, flatten it out, put it back on top, and repress it. You can also pull one end and pull it over a little bit. Okay, here's something else that may happen to you. Do you see how right here I'm kind of getting close to not having enough fabric? Well, one thing you can do is the yanking method. You can peel this back, pull over some of the fabric, and then iron it flat. And sometimes that little bit right there is enough to make it work. So now I'm going to put this in here. Right sides together. Check the corner. The other thing is, in this technique, you're working from the right side, so you see exactly what you're going to get. So you can plan your fabric better than a foundation type method. You are not sewing through the paper, so you can reuse the pattern. In foundation piecing, you cannot do that, but in this, we're not sewing through it, we're sewing next to it. So you can actually reuse the pattern. You would just save it and take Ziploc baggies and put each section in a baggie and then reuse it. So this little circle here, what this circle tells me is when I sew this section to this section, it needs to line up right there. And basically what you do is you just pin it like you would a traditional quilt block. You just put a pin right there where that seam crosses. This is the ice cream cone part, okay, where the ice cream hits it. Okay, these two go together. Press it flat. You might notice I'm not pressing long. I'm just pressing it down and coming right back up. Don't hold your iron on it a long time. Just long enough for it to heat up. Checking the corners. This one I'm going to put 2 pins. And I always put my pins straight up and down. Okay. Then I'm going to take this and pinch fold it, and I'm going to sew right along that fold. And if you're at any doubt about where the seam is, just sew a little away from where you think it should be. You can always sew closer. I'd much rather sew closer than unsew. Now I'm going to flip this back. Okay, you can see I didn't sew close enough. Well, in this case, I'm just going to overlap the seam. Who cares if my ice cream cone, the brown, is a little bit bigger than the background? So I'm actually going to push that over and press it. What's important in this technique is that the paper is next to each other. As long as the paper is next to each other, then the next pattern piece will fit. But if you start leaving space between everything, they won't. So here I would trim this straight. And now I've got one more piece, and then I can add section A to section B. The numbers do give you an idea of what to sew next to what. if you don't know which piece goes next, look at the numbers. But once you get into larger patterns, you're really looking for any two that you can sew together. You can actually chain stitch in this technique, whereas you cannot do that in foundation, so it's faster. It's important to have a lightweight iron, an iron that gets good and hot. You don't want anything heavy, and it's a lot of ironing. You don't want to have to go a long distance to get to your iron. Another thing is, if you have an iron that does not have holes in it, that is better for this, because if you fall right over a hole, it won't give you an even heat distribution. Okay, so now I'm ready to join this section to this section. I need to line it up right there. So all I'm going to do is put it right sides together. I'm going to see where the seam is going to hit, and I'm going to put a pin right there. And then I'll pin the corners just like I pinned, matching the paper. And then sew that seam. You can do this. This is not brain surgery. Okay, after you put the pins in it, then take your finger and just give it a little pinch. And that way you can see kind of where the paper is, and we want to sew a little away from that. There it is, and we're going to go ahead and pull off these pieces because they're in the middle and we don't need them anymore. The freezer paper does not leave anything on your fabric. It's just a wax, and you can reuse it over and over again. If you've never used freezer paper, it's pretty wonderful. So now you can see the bottom of the ice cream cone is right here, and you would continue, go ahead and sew now section C to A and B, and then you would sew D and E together and put them together, and then these two go on to the rest. And that's it. And then you just press it, and then you take a rotary cutter and you square it up. And that's how you do it.